All right, we're recording.
How'd you get that? Hi everyone, in case everyone doesn't know who all of us are back here, I'm Beth, Tammy, Peggy, and Brandy. I'm sure you've seen emails from all of us floating around. Everyone should have handouts. If you don't, they're in the back there. There's a couple there. There's one that says buyer side services, one that says seller side services, and then one is just a list of items when you have estate clients, what you need to collect and what, different terms mean and things like that. So Tammy handles all the seller files, so she'll go through and just kind of give an overview as to what we do once you submit your file to the office through Dotloop and it's shared with us, kind of how we take things from there and what we do to get you guys to settlement.
Okay, after you submit your file through Dotloop, make sure, I don't really know too much about Dotloop, but make sure that you don't put it in with your listing folder. I think you have to do it as a sale, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and always make sure you hit submit for review. Otherwise, the office doesn't see it and they can't share it with us. What's very important is your conveyancing application. We go by everything on this with the seller side files. It lets us know if you want us to order the UNO, HOA docs. It lets us know if there's a home warranty that your seller is paying for, what your broker service fee is, very important, flat commission fee, and then also your commissions. Now, once we get your file, we're going to send you out an email saying, yay, we received it and we're starting to process it. If you don't receive that email, most likely we don't have your file. That should be like a red flag. So we might not know about it. Go ahead.
From the day we hit submit for review, like how long does it usually take for you to get back?
Well, it has to go to Sam.
Okay.
She does whatever, I don't really know what she processes it, how, and then she sends it to our office. Our main office opens it for you, so it may be a few days.
Okay.
Depending upon, like, if you submit it on Friday, maybe we might not get it till the following week. But I would say within 5 days, maybe,
Okay.
of you submitting it. If you don't hear from us, send me an email, question it, something, because it's better to know up ahead than 2 days before you're closing and say, ooh, I don't have it, So once we do get the file, we'll open it up and we'll start ordering everything. We order tax certs, water sewer certs. Like I said on the conveyancing application, if you want us to order the UNL, we order that right away. Any HOA docs, we order that right away also. But now we have noticed with this new TRID, there are some title companies that are ordering tax certs. So we're allowing for that also. We've been in contact with them so we know who is, who isn't, so. I also send out an email to the buying agent saying, hey, let me know who your title company is so that I can be in contact with them also. After we get the process rolling, once you get the title in from the other title company, I'm not always copied on it. If you could always just shoot me the email with the title, that's great. Then I can start clearing the title for you, and that's what I do next is if there's any payoffs, liens, judgments, anything like that that's on your seller side, we will help remove that. Old mortgages, they take a little while, so as soon as you get the title, it's best to send it right to me so that if there is any issues, we can start working on them right away. So once all of those certs and everything come in, I forward them to the title company that's handling your closing. All your charges, everything like that, all the tax certs, so that they can start preparing your CDs now, seller's disclosures, or closing disclosures. And then after the file is complete, I'll submit it to Becca for your escrow check. And then there'll be like a packet there with your escrow check, and you would pick that up from her and take it to closing. So that's basically the whole seller side file.
So do you see why it's so important for your conveyancing application to have the right fees on it and flat commission fees and things? Everyone charges something different. Some people don't charge at all. Some people charge $115. Some people charge $295, $3, whatever it is. Think of the volume. There's a time where she has 100 files sitting on her lap that are closing in a month. So things like that, to have to go back to the agent and say, hey, I'm missing this, hey, I'm missing this. It's your job as agents to make sure that Tammy has all your information, so by the time the HUD sheet or the closing disclosure goes out, it's complete, and you don't have to say, where's my this, where's my home warranty, where's this and that. You know, the more information we have, the better you look at closing, because you don't have to add or change anything. And I think, go ahead.
Another thing that I did miss is payoffs. It's very important on the payoff authorization form that I have an actual signature. Banks will not accept electronic signatures. Like if I have to fax over the request to the bank, the lender, they will not give me the payoff. Sometimes they don't even respond. So I could be waiting like a week and I have no idea. I follow up with them and they're like, oh, we don't accept e-signatures. So that's very important on that payoff authorization form that we have a real live signature. It can be emailed, it can be faxed. I don't need like the original, but I do need a real signature. And then also, I know company policy is we're not allowed to have social security numbers from your sellers, but I need it to clear domestic relations, to get the payoffs. So if you're not comfortable with getting that information, please have your seller call me after the file's been submitted, so that I have a file, so that I can match up that name, that address with a file, and then that client can call me directly, I can get their information from them, and you're not involved with their social security numbers if you feel more comfortable that way.
Does anybody have any questions on that? Kind of like gives the whole overview of what Tammy does on every one of your files, and kind of gives the timeline. Sometimes we get a file 2 weeks before closing, which isn't great, so you're rushing everything and begging banks for payoffs and things like that.
Tax
So
collectors, you know, begging them, you know, some of these tax collectors in small townships, they only work part-time. You know, so they might work Tuesday and Wednesday, and you have a closing on Friday, and I just got this file, well, we might be out of luck, you know, so it's like, we have to do everything in a timely manner for other people also.
right. And especially for the seller files, if you move up a closing date, sometimes I'll find out from co-ops and you find out from title companies that a settlement date's moved up a month.
Mhm,
Think about it, it can take over a week to get a mortgage payoff alone.
mhm.
If we find out on a Monday that you're settling on a Friday, it's gonna be, it might be a struggle. It might not, you know, and usually it all works out in the end. Rarely do we have to,
Or if a
Yeah.
file's been delayed also, I need to know this because of the fact that I'm ordering final water and sewers. So the water and sewer company has an end date, and they go out to do a final meter reading, and if your settlement is delayed a week, that final water and sewer reading is not good anymore, and I might have to pay another cert fee, so that adds more charges to your seller. It's just a snowball effect if there's a date change that I need to know as soon as possible so that I can contact everybody, banks, water, sewer, everybody, so that we have everything that you need for closing with the correct dates.
and this is all just for seller files. I know it's a lot of information, but
Oh, UNOs too, I wanna go over that a little bit. We just do the application for the UNO. Each township requires different certs, some may not, some may, and that is on either you or your seller to provide all of the certs for the township. So basically, all we do is fill out the application, mail in the check. Now in Ben Salem, they've changed that. They do not want everything in pieces. They want everything together as a package. So we can still provide you with the application and check, but you would have to have all the certs and you have to take them down personally and hand them in all at once.
and that's because we don't wanna pick vendors to do a chimney cert that your seller may have had a bad relationship with and may not like, and then it causes a delay. You know, that's between you and your sellers, what vendors you wanna use to get those certifications and repairs, whatever else
Or
needs to be done.
scheduling issues.
Scheduling,
You know,
You know,
Sure, that's a lot of work for you guys.
Right.
it would be unmanageable. We wouldn't be able to do it, just
Right.
with our volume.
Yeah, so imagine if they're trying to do it for 100 files, I can barely do it for, you know, a couple of.
Yeah.
Yeah, coordinating things like that is just, it's way, you know, it's out of our realm of even humanly being able to do that, but,
I make my sellers do it.
mhm.
yeah.
We try.
Here, this is who you have to call, this is what you have to do,
Yeah.
you gotta get it done.
And I think sellers are probably receptive to that. I'm selling my house, what do I have to do that, you know?
Right.
They don't-
If
Some
you,
are good,
if
some
you're
aren't.
you
upfront
don't
and
do-
honest
you don't
with
sell your
them,
house.
right, yep,
Mhm.
you know, your agents take on a lot of responsibility. That's something that you can, you know, be in contact with your sellers, but put it on them so that they have to arrange that at their convenience and, you know, make that happen that way. Okay, the other handout is for buyer side services, which there's a couple of us in the office that do work on buyer files. Same thing with dot loop, every file gets submitted the same way. Hit submit for review, please, because that's a big deal that people forget. As you can see, just like Tammy said, the file's opened by our corporate office. So she takes whatever she receives from Sam and opens up a file, tries to follow up with agents with questions and things like that. The affiliated business arrangement form is huge. That's what we have to go by. Do they select Bucks County Abstract as the buyer or do they not? I know with the DocuSign, and I don't know how this works, but we have people that clicked in the wrong spot. And they didn't pick us, and we find out 2 weeks before closing that we were the title company, they forgot to tell us. That's a big deal to make sure that's right, because one person opening, like I said, hundreds of files, is to have to follow up and go through all that is a humongous task. So the more conscious you are of agents submitting your paperwork, the better, to make sure that that's right. So from the main office, they order the title search, which the search is the report from the courthouse, from our searcher that tells us what liens, judgments, tax liens, things like that are open on the property. They'll research estates, they'll research restrictions, things like that. They'll pull they may pull restrictions from 1898. That's how much in depth they have to go into these title searches. A lot of times we find out a week into the transaction that the deal's canceled. Money down the tubes, because searches are not cheap. Each search is between $100 and $200. So think about it that way. You know, if you're not sure the deal's gonna go, keep in contact with us, let us know. We are able to put stuff like that on hold and then continue without losing money and spending that money and then having to cancel it a week into it when everything's already done. Rebecca at the main office, she'll search child support liens. She'll search Patriot Act, which is required, that's the terrorist search on all names to make sure that there's no issues with the federal government that way. And then she reviews the conveyancing application as well, because some agents need us to order the UNO. If it's a buyer taking possession as is, buyer has to order the UNO. So that's kind of, that conveyancing application isn't just for seller files, it's for buyer files too. So she keeps in contact with agents that way, gets it started, and then she assigns, the buyer files go through a lot of hands, so that's why we're all here. You can learn faces and who does what. I get the file, I send the confirmation email out that Tammy was talking about to the agent. So I start out with the whole file. Once the search comes in, I review the search, get help from our attorneys to do that. Kind of like set the file up for processing, then either myself, mostly Brandy, takes over the processing, and Peggy will start the process. We'll talk to the listing side, make sure that they're handling the tax certs and things like that. All the stuff that Tammy does is on the seller side. We have to make sure that they're actually doing their job. Some of these small agencies don't always do that. They have us do it. So to not cause any delays, we have to communicate that up front to see, who's doing what in the big picture of things. Brady will prepare the title commitment. She'll send send that out to the agents, the listing agent, the conveyancers, the mortgage company, anybody that needs it, she sends it out to. So you'll see emails from Brandy a lot in the beginning of the file. And from there, she'll collect anything that's needed to process it. A lot of times sellers are estates. That's a lot of documentation to collect from sellers, which is not easy to do when the seller isn't our client. So she goes through and does all that. There's a separate handout for what we need for estate transactions. That's a whole other class, but at least you have that now, what to think about if you represent an estate. Corporation information, a lot of buyers buy under a corporation. We have to collect all sorts of corporate documents, search them for tax liens, things like that. Divorce, bankruptcy, all that kind of stuff. Anything to get the title clear so that we can ensure that your buyers have clear title to the property. She gets basically everything from the conveyancer that is similar to what Tammy does, all the payoffs, use and occupancy, tax searches, water sewer bills, termite bills, warranty, everything else like that. Yep. She'll collect all that and put it all together. Excuse me, on the closing disclosure. Settlements, buyer settlements are scheduled with us and the title company first. A lot of times people go right to Sam to schedule the settlement because she sends out the reminders about the conference rooms. You can reserve a conference room, but that might not mean that you have a body to conduct your settlement. So you need to make sure that somebody's available to do your closing, and which we always are. It's hardly ever a problem, but you need to make sure you have a settlement schedule with the title company first, and then reserve the room to correspond to that time. So Brandy will do the settlement notices, or whoever's processing the file will do the settlement notices for that. Peggy handles pretty much the whole end of the file. So she'll get the final closing disclosure ready, work with the mortgage companies, take any instruction from them to prepare the final settlement sheets for yourselves and your clients. So that's putting kind of the whole big picture into one form, fee-wise, and the mortgage company, again, delivers that to your clients based on the new trade rules. So, and then it goes into just post-closing. There are a lot of stuff happens after settlement, if we have to escrow money for anything, or, recording and policies, that's all handled from another office, but we'll help them with that if we need to. And again, this has reminders, pretty much the same as Tammy's. Make sure your conveyancing application is filled out. About canceling searches, that's really important. If you start a file with us and then you have to cancel, just let us know as soon as you can, so that, again, it's costly, it's time, it's money, it's search, it's a lot of things go into it to, be able to cut it off before a lot of money is spent. There's the reminder, any cashier's checks brought to closing are payable to the title company, not Keller Williams. We get a lot of checks payable to Keller Williams at settlement, and that's not right. And then just reminders, anything weird about your clients. If you know they're divorcing, tell us that, because that's a big deal. We need to address that. If clients are going through bankruptcies, or somebody's deceased, that's a big deal. If there's a trust involved, that's an even bigger deal. There's a lot of variables that if you hear some of those terms in your conversations with other agents about the deal, tell us, because it's something that we're gonna have to work on sooner than later, than a normal, A to B transaction. There's more to research there. Does anybody have any question on the buyers? Everybody understands what title insurance is and why your clients need it? I know it says optional. Believe me, they don't want to waive it. Last thing you want to do is have your clients buy from an estate and then have an inheritance tax lien filed on the property 2 years later because the estate never did their job and closed out the estate on the property. Or the seller paid off lines of credit. The banks never closed them out. They just never did. And now your clients have liens on the property that they took forward because they didn't buy the title insurance. So,
Do we ever have, don't buy title insurance?
rarely,
We've
but
had
a few.
I think in 30 years I had one person, and it wasn't even my sale, I just know of one person that didn't buy title insurance.
We have one now that's getting a purchase money mortgage that they decided they don't want to pay the $22 for the title insurance
For the owners.
for the owners, trying to get that resolved, but $22, that's all it, most buyers are financing, so the lenders require the title insurance, so that's one part of the policy that the buyer can't get away from paying. They have to pay that. To get the simultaneous owner's policy at the same time is anywhere from $5 to a couple hundred at most, and that's rare. It usually is such a small number, it's kind of a no-brainer for them to get it. So the thing is that it says optional in some places, and that's hard to hard to explain why. Have people call us if you want, if they have questions about title insurance, because it's not really a question you should be answering, but
What's the difference with an enhanced title policy?
I knew that was gonna come up.
Sorry.
I have a website that I can send you. We're gonna
I
revise
saw
our
that.
conveyancing application. To be honest, it gives a little bit of extra coverage. It's 10% more. You pay 10% more than the standard title policy.
Just on the owner's portion or
No, on the whole,
on the entire thing?
yep. So if it was $2,000, it's now $2,200 split between lenders and owners, but it's more expensive. It gets a little bit more different coverage, but it doesn't apply that, it's not super necessary without
Right.
saying it that way. I know our conveyancing application has asked for it, huh?
Could you give an example of what would be a time that is necessary?
No.
Okay.
No.
Go with that.
But I can send you a chart that gives you the difference. If a buyer's buying new construction on a subdivided lot that Joe Smith subdivided himself, he didn't get any permits, he didn't do this, and your buyer wants to buy it, buy the enhanced policy. How often does that happen?
My daughter's house that she bought, you didn't handle
There's
that.
too many police though. Did he get township permits to build?
In Middletown Township,
I have no idea.
he did. He did have permits,
Right.
but they literally had 3 houses, or 3 lots and 2 houses on those 3 lots. And the lot in the center had half owned by each of them, but only still in the builder's name. I have to know that. So
That's
that would have been a
complicated.
good
Yeah,
time,
that's-
and I probably wouldn't have had to do all that.
I don't know that it would have resolved that problem, but that's,
He tried to
and
tell
that's,
me, don't
so-
worry about it, the tax on that annually is so small, you can just split it.
no. I can't believe the township let him do that.
Swear to God.
Yeah.
It happened.
Uh-huh.
I think there's an inflation rider on the enhanced policy where they'll pay you up to 15% more than your actual sale price if you suffer a loss, and that's part of the enhanced policy. Where if you bought the property for $200,000, you have insurance up to $200,000. But if you buy the enhanced policy, you might have insurance up to $200,000 plus 15%.
So are you saying that if it's a new construction, it's a good idea to get enhanced?
Nope.
Okay.
It would be really rare to have our underwriters strongly say, our underwriters kind of want us to steer away from, the risk to our underwriters is huge because it covers such random stuff. That's a whole nother class that I could do, but I don't know that I've sold one in eight years. It's rare, like I said, and most people don't wanna spend the extra money even though it's just a small amount of money. Most FHA, our buyers are FHA, putting every cent they have down on a property, they don't wanna spend any additional money, but,
Maybe if you have too much in closing costs, maybe you can add the enhanced policy.
I don't think our underwriters are gonna want us to do that, I think.
No, I'm talking about if a buyer is
I
getting
know.
too much seller assistance from the seller and they have to come up with expenses to cover that. That might be something that you use.
Maybe.
But really
I don't know
would
that
be
my underwriters
beneficial,
will love that, yeah. Like I said, it's something that I have to talk to our underwriters when we insure, so it's, like I said, it's not an easy thing, but I think everyone's just fine with the standard title policy. Any other questions? Does everybody know who does what? Who's who? Who the players are?
What does Brittany do?
Poor Brandy. And then we do have, again, in our main office, Rebecca, she's the one that you'll get any initial emails from asking about UNO or things like that. She does everything from our corporate office, so she'll eventually be coming here to help us too, which is good.
Any questions?
Closing disclosure, short questions? Anybody
Closing
still,
disclosure
Trin's
for
going
the
well?
seller side. You're allowed to give that to us, right?
The settlement
The seller
statement,
side?
the settlement statement.
Oh, you can give us a settlement statement.
Yes.
Yep. Part of the new TRID guidelines or any closing disclosures are only allowed to be given to the client, and that has to come directly from the bank to the buyers, or from the title company to the sellers if they ask it. Agents are allowed to get a settlement statement, so if you don't hesitate to ask for that, especially if you have sellers from other title companies, because they will produce that for you so you can review fees prior to closing.
How about a buyer's settlement statement?
That's the same thing.
Okay.
Yep. Buyer,
It's a
seller.
combined, it's a buyer-seller
Yes.
combined settlement statement.
That's what you take at the end of closing to Becca, to the, it kind of replaces the old HUD format. That's the summary disbursement of what happened at closing, where everyone's money went, who got what, shows what your commissions were so that Becca knows how to pay you, things like that. So you are allowed to get that, but any closing disclosures you're not supposed to get, per the new trade guidelines.
Unless you're given by your client.
Right, unless your client sends it to you, that's between you and your client, but
And it says in the agreement of sale that the client has to give it to you.
really,
So you ask your client, you say, hey, in the agreement of sale, it says that you're required to give this to me. Could you send it to me, please? But if you get a settlement statement and you can look that over, then it doesn't matter whether you get a closing disclosure.
I would think most clients would want the agent to look at the settlement disclosure when they get it.
And how soon are they
getting
that?
so the closing disclosures go, well, the seller's closing disclosures are just like a seller side HUD. There's no 3-day review period, anything like that. That's typically signed at closing. You can get, again, those settlement statements early, but the buyer's closing disclosures have to come from the lender 3 days before closing. What's coming from the lender isn't always accurate. So When your buyer gets a closing disclosure from the lender, it might not have real estate taxes on there, it might not have your 295 on there. We tell the lender what to put on their preliminary disclosure. 9 times out of 10, they don't listen. We have 1 or 2 banks that arrange it with us before disclosing it to the buyers. Most times they don't. That's why it's important to use lenders that you trust. Our in-house lenders are awesome.
They do.
They are really good. They know what they're doing. They're, everybody's kind of going really well with this TRID thing. So they all know that it's routine to them now how it all works. But just be cautious when and if you want us to, well, we're not supposed to see it either, but a lot of times we'll get the closing disclosure that was sent to the borrower and it's missing a lot of information. Could be thousands of dollars of information. It's a sin because your buyer looks at that bottom line and says, okay, I need $22,000 for closing. Once the lender gets the closing disclosure approved by us, it may be $24,000. It may be, it may be less. It may be, just be proactive with your clients. Tell them that until it's final, nothing's final, which kind of negates what the whole TRID thing is to begin with. The purpose was to get them a final disclosure 3 days before closing so that at the settlement table there's no changes needed. They found loopholes around that. They disclose just off the cuff to get it out and in their hands for a 3-day review, finalize it in the interim with the title company, and then the day before closing is typically when we have the actual final numbers. So,
By the way, all these people that make up the TRID rules, none of them have ever done a real estate transaction.
can you tell?
I had a meeting with Mike Fitzpatrick and Brian Fitzpatrick, who's running for Congress on Saturday, and I discussed it with them. And Brian told me that, or Mike told me that he was at a finance committee meeting where they were interviewing the people on the CFPB, or whatever that is, Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau. And not any one of them has ever sat through or gone through a closing or sold a piece of real estate. So all these people that are making up rules have no idea what the industry's all about.
Right. You can tell.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you represent a client and not be able to go over their closing disclosure with them?
So just beware. But again, our in-house people, everybody has their own lenders that they like to deal with. We're very fortunate to have 2 really good in-house lenders that take care of their clients and communicate really well with us and you guys, the agents. So you want your deal to go to the table, use somebody in-house that can make it happen. So how about any other questions? And again, the estate handout, just keep that for your reference. I mean, I know you'll come up with an estate seller at some point in time, so keep it handy. That's kind of gives you an overview as to what you need to collect from them to get to the title company to clear the title. So who means what, how your agreement of sale should be titled. If you're the listing agent and you get an agreement of sale and your seller's deceased and they have the seller listed as Joe Smith, that's not right. Joe Smith isn't the seller anymore. The estate of Joe Smith is the seller.
Or if you have a husband and wife that own the property and they're both deceased, you need to know who was the last to die, because they are the ones that is the estate of. It's the last person that has passed.
Right.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Husband and wife own it. Husband dies first, property goes to wife, then wife dies.
It's the wife's estate.
Right.
Mhm. Or even like if you do have a listing and it was in husband and wife's name and the wife is still living, we still need the husband's death cert, no matter if it's 20 years ago, 30, they still need to have proof of death for that owner.
And that's all underwriting guidelines. I mean, there's had to be, they have to trace the chain of title to make sure all the possible outstanding interest is gone. I mean, if somebody's deceased, they have no more interest in the property, obviously it all vested to the wife. We need proof that that happened. Otherwise, we have to allow for any other variables that could take place. Divorces are huge too.
I was also gonna say too, like if, say you have a married couple now, but that married couple bought the house as a single person, like say if the man bought the house, but now he is married, 9 times out of 10, the title company will want that wife to sign off of that property because she does have marital interest. She might not be on the deed, but in Pennsylvania, she does have marital rights. So she will need to sign off on that to make sure that they aren't going through a divorce, that, there's nothing, that could hold up.
Yep. she could put a claim in for
Yeah.
equitable interest and things like that. That happens a lot.
It does.
So, and yeah, marriage licenses, things like that, we'll need that to prove. People's name change, they bought their property as, you know, Joe Smith and then, or Jane Smith, and she married Joe Gottlieb, and now she's Jane Gottlieb. You need that marriage license, cause now their names don't match up. How do I know that you're that same person?
It's all in chain. They have to have paper documentation to show everything.
Right.
So you do have to convey that to your sellers, like, we're not just asking for this to be nosy, like, we need to make sure that there's no claims gonna be filed so that your buyer will have clear title when they
Right.
buy the home.
It's tough to explain that to sellers because they do. They think that you're being, why do you need my social security number? Well, you call your bank and ask if they're gonna give me a third party a payoff with the new privacy guidelines. They're not. They need to fax over something you're writing with the social security number to, you know. Again, spouses, things like that. We have people that, this poor elderly woman, her husband died 30 years ago. If my underwriter audits that file and they see, well, what happened to Joe? And I can't prove that he died, that's a big problem. So it's, you know, there's different versions of proof
And
of
there
death that
are
we can
like
collect,
ways
but-
around, like the death cert, like you said, 30 years ago, they might not have a death certificate laying around. Maybe they have a prayer card, maybe they have something from the funeral home, like we can work around it. You know, possibilities, we just have to ask the title company what they will accept. But, you know, ultimately, the death certificate would be the right thing.
You can always get a death certificate from,
We've had to have that happen.
Yes.
People order it from the state.
and your state rep can help you with that too.
What do you do in a situation where you have an owner that's listed that's missing? Let's say they flew the coop 15 years ago.
You need an attorney.
What kind of documentation would be
You would need an
feasible?
attorney.
You need an attorney.
An
You
attorney.
need a court order.
You need a court order to sell, yeah, which is gonna be hard to get.
Declare them something or other, probably.
Yeah,
You know, thinking that is a potential situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that would need legal advice.
yeah, definitely. How to make that work.
Trust agreements are also very big. If the house is in a trust agreement, we need a copy of the trust agreement. No matter how private, you know, your seller may feel about the trust agreement, the title company still needs to see who the trustees are, you know, who's legally able to sign for the trust. You know, we're not looking at it to be
Oh,
personal.
powers of attorney
Have to be recordable, right?
have to be recordable. Anytime you have a power of attorney, they need to be reviewed.
Yes.
So,
ahead of time, and then the originals need to be at closing, and the originals will be taken until they're recorded at the Register of Deed, or
Yep.
Recorder of Deeds office.
Yep.
And then the power of attorney will be given back the original, but you have to let your sellers know that the originals have to be there and they do have to give them up.
real estate is probably everybody's biggest asset. If you're, so-and-so can't sign because they gave somebody power of attorney, that's not always good enough for our underwriters just because. That's not a good reason. Like if somebody's using a power of attorney, our underwriters wanna know why. Because there's so much fraud out there with powers of attorney, and not to say that anyone has clients that are committing fraud, but there's fraud out there and we've been burned. Not us personally, but our underwriters have been burned, where people used a fraudulent power of attorney to convey a property. And the seller comes back and says, what just happened here? I didn't give my authority to do that. A lot of times we'll need a letter from a physician saying that the seller is not capable of signing because they have dementia, or, you know, things like that. That's standard practice anymore. And again, people think that it's intrusive, but the big world of underwriting guidelines with title insurance, it's not. That's, you know, that's assessing the risk of a possible fraud case and saying, all right, well, we know that this power of attorney was valid, it was signed, notarized, recordable, and we know exactly where Mrs. Seller is. She's in a nursing home with dementia and she can't make any decisions on her own behalf. So, you know, we walk a fine line. People, again, think we're nosy, but we don't ask for stuff for our health. It always has a reason.
Deed packages also, if you need a deed package, please make sure that it's in a timely manner so that we can ask the title company to prepare it. It needs time to go to your seller. Also, if your seller's out of the country, you know, you need to go to
A U.S. consulate, that's rare, but
right, but we've had happen, you know, like where a seller is away on business in, Europe or something, and they need to make sure that it's a US consulate. So it takes time to have that, and then we still need the originals back to closing,
Right.
to close.
There was something else I was gonna say. Powers of attorneys, trust. I don't know. Does anybody else have any bank-owned properties? We do title insurance for bank-owned properties. I know that they a lot of times offer free title insurance to your clients if they go with the seller's title company. Buyer beware, you're gonna get what you pay for. You don't pay any title insurance, you're probably not gonna get the service that you're used to getting on your transaction. So if you have questions with that, again, case-by-case basis, a lot of banks work more efficiently than others. Some banks handle their title overseas. Sometimes you're dealing with, people, again, not in this country that you're not used to having nighttime work hours instead of day, it's always tricky. So sometimes it's worth it to pay for the title to stay local, where you have control. Howard he had a good example. He didn't get paid for 3 weeks.
Not only that, but they pay for the title insurance premium. They do not pay some of the other fees. And they tack on other fees, so when it comes down to it, it may not cost them as much as normal title insurance, but it's still not gonna be a free policy.
Right.
You're gonna pay other fees, and for the difference in the money, especially if it's Altisource, I
Yeah.
would say Altisource is the worst. They have horrible conveyancing, the whole process is awful. It took me 3 or 4 weeks to get my paycheck after settlement. I had to call them like every day.
Sometimes there's even a delay in
Well, that-
recording the deed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I won't even let a buyer use them. I mean, I know my investors are, pretty smart, but they'll listen to me.
Right.
And I'll tell them, you think you're gonna get free title insurance? Where do you have a problem?
Right.
And the bank didn't pay a $5,000 water bill. You think it's gonna be easy to get them to pay it?
Right.
You're gonna have to lay out the money and then sue the title company. Do you wanna go through that? Or do
Yep.
you wanna use my title company, make sure everything's taken care of?
Yeah, a lot of these title companies are not from this area. They don't know the intricacies of the different water and sewer authorities and homeowners associations and things like that. It's, we've seen homeowners association dues missing, and in a REO, that could be 6 months worth of dues or more that the homeowners association will demand and give your client a rough time until it's paid. So just think about that if, it's with REOs. I know it's really hard to sell paying for title insurance. Again, I've seen settlement fees of $695 in just a settlement fee. Title insurance is only $1,000.
Right.
Pay the extra money, and have it done locally where you can control everything. So it's just something to think about. Any other questions?
How about short sales? Wanna talk about those?
No, I'm just kidding. That's actually a short sale to us is a normal transaction. Buyer to seller with a short payoff.
If you can get the buyer's agent to use our title company on a short sale, it makes things a whole lot easier.
Yep.
I mean, unless they have a company that, does a lot of short sales,
Yeah,
it's.
we do a lot of short sales in our office, so we're used to them. We have attorneys that help us, we have agents that are really good at it.
If you have the seller side, short sale too.
Buyer's agent, don't you select with your client,
Yeah.
the title company?
Right.
Yeah, but if you have a listing, it's your job to inform the buyer's agent that it would be much easier if you use our title company. We've already done certain research on it, and we know how the transaction's gonna go. A lot of agents will let you do that, some agents won't,
Yeah,
but you just have to have a conversation with them about it, and see if you can convince them to use our title company.
Now,
You're
if
right.
you do have a listing that's a short sale, and they're not going to use us as a title company, it is easier if the title company handles all the certs. Generally, a bank will not pay us for the certs, so we don't get paid for all the money that we put out. And plus the fact you never know like a timeline of when it's approved. Usually the title company has more control over that, so it's easier if they just handle all of the certifications.
right. We're always here. You can always stop by and ask us questions or send us emails. Everybody knows where our office is, I think, so definitely come by. This should help you, like if you need to explain to your, to your buyer who's gonna do what, who's gonna do this for you, this can be a reference for you to kind of convey to your buyer what our conveyancing department does. So keep that handy. I know somebody uses it in their listing packet. Is it you? So it's worth it to have that in there just to show your agents how much your office does to back you up and get you to closing. It's a lot of work. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it is when you think about it, so. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Hey, I just now got a call from Frank, and you're talking about mortgage satisfaction problems. It's the Delaware Landing guy. It showed up with the 2 months.
I need to take this down.
The second mortgage satisfied the first mortgage. Which